welcome to Push Your Glasses Up. I'm Mikey, and today we're doing our first episode of Cram Sesh, which is kind of covering what has come in a franchise before a new entry comes out. Today we're talking about Halloween 78 and 2018. It's frustrating that we have to make that differential at this point, but so today I'm joined by a guest for only the second time in the show's 121 episodes, but you may know him from comicbook.com or internet shit posting in general. Spencer Perry, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Of course. My co-host Reena is not a fan of slashers, so I had to outsource for this one. Yeah, so it's good to have somebody who clearly, as outfit shows, is willing to dive into Halloween with me. What is your history with the franchise?
Halloween has a very special place in my heart because, unlike a lot of kids or people that have stories of like seeing a movie that was very age inappropriate when they were very young, like, you know, you always hear, "Oh, I saw The Exorcist when I was 5 and it messed me up," that sort of thing. I always stuck to like age appropriate horror stuff when I was a kid. So like Goosebumps,
spooky.
Yeah. Are You Afraid of the Dark? You know, and that was good enough for me. Like that, I think part of it was my parents wouldn't let me watch it. I couldn't get away with watching those things when I was younger. But I was also
you were in a puritanical Southern home, so
right. And but when I was in 6th or 7th grade, I can't remember which, I was homesick one October, and my mom stayed home with me, and she saw that the original Halloween was coming on television, and she was like, "Hey, have you ever seen the original Halloween?" I said, "No." And
no, you've never let me.
Exactly, yeah. And but you know, she had seen it when it came out in the theaters in 78. So she was like, "Let's watch it." And, you know, in her mind, she was like, you know, it's on cable in the middle of the day, so any of the bad stuff, of which there is minimal, anyway, was, you know, edited around or out completely. And I was totally transfixed from that moment on. You know, that was kind of the kick I needed to really become a big horror fan, was seeing Halloween. And, you know, haven't stopped ever since. So, you know, even though I don't love every movie in the series, I still have an appreciation for them and a love for the franchise.
Cool. Yeah, for me, I similarly, I would say I saw the first movie, yes, too early. But again, it was like a TV edit, so
right.
Technically it had more footage, but not like the nudity and stuff, but like, yeah, the Halloween 2 extra shot stuff.
You know, sister seed planting stuff.
Right, yeah. So other than Halloween 1, 2, and 3, I only know, like, I've seen them, but in a not paying attention way with like the rest of the franchise.
Yeah.
Except for I maybe saw H2O in the theaters and I don't remember. But yeah, the stuff with like my history is mostly the first movie. So it helps me kind of be able to disassociate with my other memories of what's going on in like the non-canon stuff now.
Right.
But I actually, with 2018, I did not watch it until the other day. Because when it came out, I was excited to see it, but it was like during a family health crisis that was very intense. And I knew if I tried to go watch it 3 times, and the third time I actually drove to the movie theater and was sitting in the parking lot like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
Luckily, at the time, I was on AMC A-list, and it was no problem to get rid of the ticket. Yeah. But yeah, it was a little disappointing, but I knew it was good for me to not go into that situation. And then we'll get to it a little bit later. I'll talk about the connection to 2018 that I now have. But yeah, that's generally my history too. So why don't we jump into 78 then? How do you feel about this movie now versus like do you have that critical eye versus fan kind of thing? Because I know I do at this point.
Yeah, there are some. I still really love the movie. I think I watch it probably every year. I've seen it 100 times probably. I don't. It's one of those movies that like a handful of others. You buy it with every new format that gets released of home media. And then, they just put out the new 4K, which I haven't gotten yet because I don't have a 4K player or a 4K TV, but I'm like, I know I will eventually, so I might as well buy it because I want to see Halloween look the best it's ever looked at home. But yeah, it's
still with that lens bloom on everything, but just a little like, I think the colors on it and the darks will be like pretty beautiful.
But there are things about the movie that aren't perfect. Like I can always think of there's the scene when Laurie is on the phone with Annie, and they're in the houses that are across the street from each other.
Yep.
I think it's that scene, or maybe it's when Laurie's at home. But
when Annie's just like looking up, like directly above the camera, that part.
No, but there's a part where Annie says something funny, but then they cut back to Laurie, who laughs at whatever she said. But it's like a half a second cut of her laughing. Yeah. It's a really awkward cut. And then obviously, I had friends over a couple years ago to watch it before the 2018 one came out to watch the original because I don't know how many of them had seen it. And it's always fun to point out to people that haven't seen it, like, oh, if you look to the left of the screen, you can see John Carpenter's cigarette smoke wafting into the frame, and or in the opening one shot, you can see the shadow of the camera at one point, and so it's one of those movies that even though it has clear faults and like goofs, those just lean into the charm for me that build on that history of like they made this movie for no money, not realizing what it would become.
Yeah, definitely. Like the seams are there clearly because it was like a $300,000 budget, which even in the 70s is like nothing. But yeah, it's that weird balance of like adding to the charm, but you like clearly see through a lot of the movie magic at this point. But yeah, I'm in a similar boat. I think you have it like on Letterboxd. You have the original at 5, and then I have it at 4.5. Like we're pretty much in the same boat on.
In my top 4 on Letterboxd. So
yeah, no horror in my top 4. It's all the most generic genre stuff. Except for Ninja Turtles 90. That's the one that maybe isn't on everybody else. But yeah, it's interesting to go back and watch this now, like getting into a modern mindset for a sequel, because you're looking at something that is very much from the past, and I don't want to say amateur because it's obviously not amateur. It's just that it's the progenitor of everything. So like you don't have the slasher genre without like this, and like Black Christmas obviously, but like this movie is probably the one that I would say is the format. And you gotta start somewhere with that. So it's clearly like it's not student film or anything like that, but it is like that's the shot we got because that's the shot we got. So and the fact that they're able to like manage to do some of the stuff that they do in that movie still works despite that, just because you can tell the care is given to it, where they're like, we did the best we could with it. Whereas like with 2018, it's obviously like a much more expensive production, and it's like there's a baseline now where it's like, almost impossible to do what the original did with, like, sure, a boom mic gets into a shot once in a while, but like,
Right.
you can digitally take that out now. Like, so it's,
But also with the 2018 one, you're working from a point of 40 years of people dissecting the movie,
yep,
talking critically about the movie, sequels that have been made, sequels that weren't made, reboots, 40 years of people talking about The Mask alone is
yeah,
enough of an influence on what they did with the 2018 movie that that's something they, the original, they buy two masks and they're like, all right, which one do we want to use? And then they go with the Shatner one and make their adjustments to it. And,
yeah, and like with 2018, something I kind of felt through the whole thing was that they actually didn't ignore the other now non-canon stuff. They pick and chose like where to put a little bit of, like, his doctor in 2018 is like clearly hearkening to like the Cult of Michael Myers stuff a little bit, and like, so they pick and choose a little bit of that stuff to, like, the term,
it's more
like,
of a nod than so much saying, oh yeah, that happened.
exactly, yeah, and it's that's where I think it's maybe the most literal choice of selective sequel, where like they're not just they're using the meta of it a little more as a way to tell the story. But yeah, I'll go into what I started saying earlier with like 2018 was, I have that history with the original movie, but with 2018 was putting it off just because of the situation I was going through with family stuff, and watching it the other day, like, I don't know if it would have been better for me to watch it at that time, because it is exactly the thing I needed for a cathartic release, because it is about trauma and facing that down, and then like actually confronting the things that are holding you down. And that was, in that time, a year and a half of my mother and I driving back and forth from the Boston area to New York City every 2 weeks, basically. And it was stressful. So right. Like to actually not just have that talked about on film, but like in a like it's a visceral, like, we need to overcome the trauma, was extremely impactful for me the other day. And that's why when I watched it and actually like wrote up a little review for it, because I finally sat down for the first time with it, it was like immediate 5-star for me. It was like absolutely one of my favorite horror movies of any series, let alone this one. And that is something to like, it's just amazing that they were able to capture that.
Yeah.
It's sort of a miracle for like the history of pseudo sequels with like 3 and then like sort of multiple rebooting of stories within the actual canon stuff. So it's just sort of a miracle that it actually came through, and not only was a successful attempt, a beyond successful attempt, in my opinion. So do you I want to stay clear of Halloween Kills for now until we get like really into that one for a separate episode, but do you think that for ends they'll be able to kind of, spoiler alert, come back up from Kills, and not necessarily reach what 2018 did, but like get a little closer to it?
Well, it's hard to say because we don't. David Gordon Green has been vocal about saying that if he didn't think he was going to do something different with Ends that he had done with 2018 and then Halloween Kills, then he wouldn't do it.
Right.
And he seems very committed to coming back and making this third movie. And Halloween 2018 and then Kills do have very different energies, I think, and
Oh
that's
yeah.
that's definitely why you're seeing a much more divisive reaction to Halloween Kills. But that leaves me, really left wondering, well, what the heck is the next one going to be? Because it's hard to imagine.
It's animated now. That's what he wants to do differently.
I jokingly said to my wife, Halloween Ends would be a courtroom drama, just because.
Oh, yeah, it's
maybe,
just
I
a
don't
few
know.
good men, like
Yeah.
except Laurie ends it all by just shotgunning him in the face or something.
I mean, that might be how it ends anyway. Who knows?
Well, yeah. Just I'm thinking in the courtroom.
I think that, to your point, I think Ends will get to a point where it's dealing with the catharsis of the trauma, through line that's from these two movies, because it is in a place where Laurie is now, having dealt with what happened, trying to tap dance around spoilers.
Yeah.
Having dealt with what happened in these two movies, and then sort of a realization of, that things were not as she always thought they were for 40 years. So
Right, yeah.
I think in that way it will be interesting and different from these other two. And I'm excited to see how that, comes to a close.
Yeah. I want to hold off on that until we get to the Kills stuff. Yeah, I am I'm a little surprised with how, because 2018 does feel like a direct follow-up to 78. Yeah. There's obvious nods, all that other stuff, but it feels like a part 1, part 2. So going forward, I would love do whatever with the movie as far as how the tone you want to set or whatever, but I do hope it feels a little more, even though it's a direct follow-up, Kills didn't quite hit that for me, feeling like a part 3 of the other story. So
it feels like part 2.5.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, so why don't we stop this episode? It'll be a little short one because I think we got a good little bit on this, and then we'll have a new episode for Halloween Kills, just specifically for that. It'll be a standard episode of Push Your Glasses Up, possibly the same day, but maybe the day after. So for now, thank you for coming on, Spencer. Why don't you tell people where they can find you?
Oh, I'm at the Spencer Perry on Twitter and Letterboxd. That's about where I hang out online.
Cool. All right. Well, we will be back soon with an episode for Halloween Kills. Bye.